Over the past few weeks, I've been studying cymatics and the effects these sound frequencies have on our bodies. Now, if you've been around for a while, you will know this figurine. We used her last year when we worked on our emotional pain body and the self healing flow state we can tap into for self healing. Here on the left, I'm sticking down a circle of repeat patterns that go around a center point. Now feel free to use the exact pattern that I provided or to create your own. You can use tracing paper like I'm doing here to either trace out a similar pattern or come up with your own version. Whichever way you like to do that, please be sure not to sell this work as you are following along on an educational video that is linked back to my site. Now, I would love to see what you come up with and how you interpret today's lesson and how many details you add or leave out. Next, I used this selection of books to come up with a little wave pattern. I did enjoy that cute little book very much. It's a book filled with poems to lighten up the mood and also help along creativity. So after practicing it, I went in and drew it freehand so that I could feel what it feels like to create this pattern in reverse. So, a little name plaque there, traced out from my own work that I've done before, little curly cues here and there, and a few ideas coming together to create one cohesive piece. Now, I did want it to feel vintage and antique, but also fresh and modern with that new color palette we discovered. Now, behind this figurine, and we are calling her Venus, we are drawing that shell that I've been practicing this month. As you can see, at first I was off center because I wanted her to stand on the side, and then I changed my mind. And working off of that first drawing I did, I really wanted to make sure I got the measurements right. So, right across her hip, I drew a circle that would go around her head and pass underneath her feet. Now you'll see the small circles above and below her feet add up to 15 each. And the symbology around 15 varies across very different contexts, but it mostly represents creativity, personal freedom, and harmony. One would be right above her head and one would be right below, with 7 on each side for top and bottom. And next to her feet is a huge pearl, and that pearl represents the pearls of wisdom. Next up, you'll see that I'm inspired by this piece of lace and the grid pattern it has. Laying out this geometric net is quite easy. I'm literally just going from that corner, spacing the horizontal, diagonal, and cross diagonal lines evenly so that I can have a net forming on this edge. Now, here is where things got interesting. I discovered many variations of patterns on my little practice pieces. Now, I was figuring out whether I wanted a classical look, a more arts and craft look, or geometric. And in this discovery, it felt like there was a never ending process happening as I kept on drawing, only to discover that every single practice I attempted brought me back to that very same base shape. the circle. Now, if you can just imagine how many different things you can do with just a circle, varying the size, varying the position, varying colors, adding new lines, then the patterns become endless. The secret here is to sit down and discover that for yourself. There is something sacred about putting pen to paper and finding out how the lines want to work with you, how you discover it, how your style develops, and how you can take one corner and turn it into a repeat pattern. Like I said, these sacred discoveries can only happen when you spend time in your sketchbooks with color, outlining, drawing, playing, and enjoying the process until something clicks and you realize that you have found the pattern you want to go with. And then you can translate that onto a different design. Add the ideas, multiply them, double them, simplify them. Create to your heart's content. While you are inside your sketchbook, nobody can tell you what was right, what was wrong, how you should have done it, how you could have done it. These sacred practices are yours to enjoy, and the patterns you discover there can come from your hand in the most amazing ways. It is finally time to outline these initial ideas and to see how everything fits together and if we like it. From here, with these outlines, you could easily take some tracing paper and trace out the design exactly the way you want. Right, before we start painting, everything on our little cover design has a specific meaning. And you can make yours as easy or as simplistic as you like. I prefer a little bit of chaos. Now, none of these words are going to be on my final piece, and none of these letters either. And we're not going to have so many construction lines, but we are going to have intricate corners like that one there. We might have a geometric pattern here and there that I'll bring in. We'll have waves, we'll have a fish, we'll have our sacred geometry circle. I call this the circle of wisdom. Some curly cues. We'll have our clam, our person that represents our feminine energy or our more caring nature towards ourselves, the pearl of wisdom. Then a little plaque that will determine the timeline. And as I'm going to go through all the parts that I'm painting, I'll go over all the different meanings of every aspect. So don't be too alarmed about that. The first thing I'd like to show you is this grid, and I call it the net of angle. So a final version of that could look like this. So after drawing the basic net, you can connect it with a little crisscross on the top, almost like embroidery, creating a lovely little netting there. But that netting is going to go into a repeat pattern that we're just going to do on this corner and a little bit there. And I'll show you that in a moment. And work on that, taking some of the distractions away. Okay, so I'm going to guess here and just make a mark for myself and a little mark there. Now in that corner, we are going to start that net. So I've given the ladies in my group a little popsicle stick that they will use to create this frame with. But if you're into measurements and want to do it perfectly, I suggest around 3 centimeters. You can see that this ruler has been loved for many years. And the first line we're going to make is we're going to connect those corners. Now, in a moment of anger, we're standing at a crossroad. And at this crossroad, you can go any direction. It could either go good or it can go horribly wrong. But before it goes wrong, I want you to take 10 deep breaths. Let me show you. Using our little measuring stick there, we are going to take the width of that stick. And we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now you'll see we're going to start running out of room here in a bit, and that's exactly what I want. After that 7th breath, you need to start feeling better already. And you're going to make that 8th line while you're taking your second last in and out breath, and then your 9th line. And for the 10th line, you're just going to make a little mark. Now you're going to do that for a second round on the other side. So in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you're going to continue on your large frame. Then we are going to connect these points. There and there, there and there. We're going to use our little stick for that as well. Now this time you don't have to do your deep breaths in and out. But what I want you to start thinking about is your response. Because I don't want you to react in any way, not negative or positive. I want you to be neutral in this case. So you'll see as you go along this grid, it creates that net, right? And because it's creating that net, you can think about trapping the anger and coming up with a really great response without overreacting, without getting angry, without blame. And when we can do that, it means we are in control of our emotions. And when we are in control of our emotions, it is so much easier to make better choices. So that 10th one there is going to be our point for our first repeat pattern. And if you could understand that every time you get angry, every time you are faced with crossroads, every time you are reacting in a negative way, you are harming yourself and you are weaving this net tighter and tighter and tighter. But when you can release the anger and release the fear of having a kickback instead of a softer, more gentle response, then and only then are you beginning to take control of your life. Now, things won't always be perfect and they won't always work out as planned, and that's all right. That's why we have corners that we can take whenever we need to. So I'm quickly going to complete this side just so that I have all my bearings together. And as we go into this next phase or the next choice, and remember, you always have choices, especially when things happen. You have a choice to react or overreact. You have a choice to stay calm. You have a choice to act like a grown up, or you have a choice to act like a child. I would hope that you would rather act like a grown up when you are faced with these challenges and then make better choices. But the main aim now is to go from that 10th point, which is somewhere around here. We need to find that middle. So if that is 3 centimeters, 1.5 is the middle. And I'm quickly going to add that, whoops, 1.5 there as well. So we can find the center line for where our circular patterns are going to start. Because on that 10th point, more or less where it corresponds to that middle line, you are going to start drawing out circles. And every time your circle crosses that vertical line, you're going to put your point down. So let me demonstrate on here. So from that 10th breath, you're going to put your point down and the next circle will form and you'll put your point down there and the next circle will form and you'll put your point down there and the next circle will form and you'll put your point down there. All right? And you go only as far as you know a full circle will fit into that corner. And then you are going to put your compass down. Make sure you've got those corners. And from that point, measure your 1.5 centimeters downwards. And to double check, you can check that's also 1.5. All right. And now you can draw out that line, making sure it's going to go all the way across into those waves. Right? And then you're going to find that center point. There is the 1.5 from the 3, 1.5. And now you can draw the center line. And where that last circle met that center line, you're going to draw your next circle. From that line, you're going to draw your next circle. And from that line, you're going to draw your next circle until you reach the point where you cannot go further because your waves are in the way. Now, I briefly want to go back to this one because from that point, we created that circle, but we need another half circle on the other side if we are going to complete our pattern. So you can put your compass needle in there and just make that half circle there as well. So from that net, we are going to flow into a pattern. Now, these circles are exactly the same as any one of these three. The idea is to capture the blank spaces in between each of those construction lines to create something that repeats. You can come up with any idea you like. This one was using um, the little half moons, right? So these half moons I turned into those shapes, right? This one I used that same center shape, but I changed to that type of thing on the middle, left that blank, and then I went around and created some scallops around that edge, right? And then for this one, I literally used this space here to create flowers. And I left the opposite blank and then went that side. So this one will connect, oops, not there in the corner. That whole corner will be the same. So that and that will be part of each other. And that will repeat, which means this will repeat here, leave one blank, and across from that one we'll have that one. You're simply creating a repeat. So in the corner, to repeat that little floral there, we'll need more scallops there. And I can now go and make a leaf and another leaf, a small one and a large one. And then from here, that's larger one and the smaller one. Again, doing the same thing I did everywhere else to create my repeat pattern. And then when you've done all your little repeats, depending on what pattern you chose, we are going to head forward and paint the entire thing and complete the front cover. So we are going to have a back cover that's going to fit there, but because our book is going to be thicker, we are going to need a strip in the middle. So my strip again is the same as that, or maybe a little bit different, and this will form the spine of your book. It will be stuck together like that. So you'll have your back cover, your front cover, and your spine fitting on top of it. And I've already done a couple of things there. And to further embellish the entire thing, we are going to take the seashells that we painted in the previous couple of lessons, and we are going to miniaturize them and use these small little shells to fit into specific areas. These could be anything you want them to be, but those are memories that you want to keep. Each one of your little shells will represent a memory. Um, a good memory, a good fortune, a fabulous conversation, or anything wonderful you want to keep or treasure, right? So, as little kids or young kids, maybe I'm still a young kid, but I like to um, go for a walk and see what I can pick up on the floor. Sometimes it's a little pebble, other times it's a feather or a pretty leaf or maybe a flower that has fallen from the plant. Now, I know we're not allowed to pick up seashells anymore, but nothing is preventing you from going to the beach on a trip and painting the seashells right there from the beach scene. So these are some of the drawings I put together for you. That is our color palette that we came up with already. And all that's left to do is to start painting. And that's what we're going to do next. Now, the painting process is the really easy part, as the design is now complete, and I can take you to the desk so that we can see how this color scheme turned out. If you haven't watched the video where we come up with these colors, go ahead and watch that first so that we can all use the same colors for our book cover design. For the first layers, I used the warm tones to paint Venus and the pearl and the tongue and her hair. And I used many of the blues to paint the background with a little hint of green here and there. For the spine, I added an additional design, one with the seashells and the scallops, and the other one with just a pearl and a little bit of detail on the center part, almost looking like little stars and a string of pearls where we keep our wisdom and ideas. Now, I would love to see your progress up to this point before we continue on to next week, where I'll add more to this lesson and to the themes and topics for this month. There's a lot to keep you busy with this week. Make sure to enjoy your sketchbook and don't be afraid to add additional practices. Here, I repurposed some of my old designs, and yes, I'm going to keep on doing that until I have run out of ideas, which I doubt because there's always room for more.